that restriction is not there the way it used to be. What's that?
I should hope not.
But we don't have weddings in Lent.
Why would you hope not?
We got married during Lent.
You did?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's even in the past, those things can be dispensed with. It's a law, and it's not necessarily hard or fast. For good reason, there can be dispensation, but because marriage is a joyful thing, right? And the season of Lent is one of penance. There's a sense in which they don't. Unless you like to look at marriage as a great penance. Then you can make the case for a happy.
We couldn't do yours on Friday.
Okay. Oh, all right.
And the purple had still been on.
Okay. Well, anyway, some of these restrictions, disciplines of the past, the doctrine does not change, but the disciplines can, for good reason. And finally, the 25th session. So, I mean, there's more sessions than any previous council. This thing had been dragging on for nearly 20 years at this point. Pope Pius IV had suffered a stroke during this period, and there was a fear that the bishops present at Trent were going to restart the whole conciliarism thing and demand to elect the next pope. So the legates in charge of the council said, let's wrap this up quickly. And those who had been there for all that time said, yeah, okay, let's get it over with. And so they called the 25th session and kind of tried to wrap up everything that was on the docket that they hadn't gotten to yet. So the 25th session, unlike those ones talking about each of the sacraments and the nature of the sacraments in general, the nature of the Mass, justification, where you had the decree and then all the canons, these were just basically summaries of things that had been taught before. So there was a decree on the existence and nature of purgatory. These are all things that had been challenged by, rejected by Protestants, and so a need to restate the teaching. The same was true of the use and veneration of sacred images and relics, the intercession of the saints, and the teaching on indulgences and their efficacy. But in each of these cases, after going through each one, the decree mentioned the need to eliminate all abuses, eliminate all superstition, making sure that the people were instructed on the actual doctrine and understanding of the church. And so calling for reforms and recognizing that there had seriously been abuses in these areas in the past, and to call back to reform in those areas. And then the 25th session also taught on the keeping of fast and feast days, abstaining from meat. It doesn't mention the date, but talks in terms of fast as a type of mortification of the flesh. And then gave an extensive, expansive list of reforms of religious life, and then of the life of the curia, all very detailed reforms regarding all aspects of the life of the church. To go into all those, we would need quite a few more sessions. So that's just kind of summary there on that part. One of the things that the council called for was a catechism to come forward to instruct the faithful. Actually, the catechism was written for priests. And at the beginning of the catechism, there is a outline for homilies for every, subject matter for homilies for every week of the year, and a dogmatic and a moral subject for each. And so it was written, the Catechism of the Council of Trent was written to help form the priest. One of the very important reforms that was in those decrees, or points of reform, was the establishment of seminaries. Before, it really depended upon where you lived, how well the priests were trained. Places like Paris, Milan, or Bologna, with big cities and well-established universities, good training usually. Poor, backwards places, they might not even be literate. So attempt to standardize, making sure, or barely literate, making sure that that formation of priests was well attended to, and that they were able then to form the laity in the true doctrine of the church. So the Catechism of the Council of Trent was done in 1566. Then the breviary was reformed, the daily office, and then the Roman Missal. And all of these took place under Pope St. Pius V, the last Dominican Saint Pope, and the second to the last Pope canonized. So the only Pope since St. Pius V to be canonized is St. Pius X. So in 500 years, there's only been one, or 400 years, there's only been one other Pope that's been canonized. At least up to now. I guess we're on the cusp of another one now. But at the point of this presentation, that's still true. And Pope St. Pius V also organized the Battle of Lepanto, halting the advance of the Turks. On Rosary Sunday, October 7th, that's where the point of the feast comes from, 1571. And as far as the Missal itself, the Roman Missal, the reform of the Mass, basically it took the Mass as it had been celebrated in Rome, in certain basilicas, and made that the standard for the Latin Church. So before the mid-1500s, if you went to Portugal, they might have their own rite. Certain places in Portugal, certain places in Spain, their own rite. Milan still has its own rite, and England would have its own rite. There are lots of similarities, but little things are different here and there. And after the Council of Trent, it suppressed any rite that was not 300 years old or older. And of course, the Dominican rite was just over 300. So I think St. Pius V chose that 300 for a reason. So we were never obligated. And in fact, we were not allowed until very recently to actually use that rite. But that in many places, because these missals, the Roman Missal was brand new, it was all printed, it was all organized, those who had been using a different rite, let's say in Portugal, oh, let's give it that one, that's a nice new book, I don't want to reform, I don't want to have to mess with all this. So in many places they abandoned the use of their rite and that's at this period the Roman rite becomes universal in the Latin Church. And it's a good time for a break, so why don't we take one?